Thank you, Gitanjali, for finding time and join us in Trivandrum, Thiruvananthapuram. So, thank you all for being here. Our guest today, Dr. Gitanjali Angmo, is a person of outstanding courage and grace in the face of extreme adversity and state hostility. And as we speak, her spouse, Sonam Wangchuk, has spent 4 months in custody. As we know, this morning he's been shifted from a prison to a hospital for some medical care. I think, may I ask you to describe what is happening latest as this morning in the case related to Sonam Wangchuk?
Yes, so good morning everybody. Today is the 125th day of his detention, and he was he had some stomach infection, so he has been taken to the hospital for a checkup. I mean, hopefully everything will be okay.
Can you give us some sense of what is happening in the Supreme Court regarding your petition for his release?
Yes, so the habeas corpus was filed on the 2nd of October, and it has come to a stage where after filing the petition, all the false allegations of the detention have been countered, and on the 2nd of February they will be filing their counter, and hopefully we feel that in a week or two the case should be disposed of.
So, the charges that have been leveled against Sonam and tangentially against all the activities that you do in Ladakh is a pointer to the challenges that we are going to speak about that social entrepreneurship faces in this country. Are they linked, or are they these two things, his detention and the challenges to social entrepreneurship, unrelated? How do you understand that?
So first of all the allegations on which the detention order has been based have more than been proved to be false and accusatory. These are all based on doctored videos, and it has been done to just defame a person who has been working for the grassroots level in education and entrepreneurship and innovation. And it is definitely linked because the work that we have been doing for more than 30 years in education, in the setting up of SECMOL and now the Higher Institute, HAYAL, basically focuses on contextual education, in solving the problems of the context, in developing enterprises which do not destroy the environment or the ecosystem. So basically, for the viewers here, the entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, it differs in its purpose. Okay? The purpose of entrepreneurship is just profit maximization, but social entrepreneurship is more impact. And to me, social entrepreneurship is a tautology. It's like saying free gift, every gift is free, or true fact. So to me, every entrepreneurship should be social by the very nature of it being an enterprise, because you are improving the physical, emotional well-being of a person on earth. But somehow we thought entrepreneurship was just profit maximization. So there is a new term coined for social entrepreneurship, where it is not just profits, but also environment and impact. But to me, just profits, when you are wearing, it's like now in Delhi, I joke with my friends that most of this South Delhi crowd would very proudly wear masks and carry a oxygen cylinder displaying Versace, the brand of Gucci or Versace, but you don't even have air to breathe because you've spoiled the environment. So social entrepreneurship looks after every aspect of the community, of socially, environmental and everything, and that is how we've been working for that region. And after 2019, when the UT of Ladakh was formed, it was promised that there would be a legislature, there would be a statehood eventually, and also it would be protected under the 6th schedule, because this region is called, the Himalayas are called the third pole. They are a source of water for the entire North India, which is Indo-Gangetic plains, in addition to watering about 1 billion people, you know, to Pakistan and China and so on. So this region is very fragile, and mindless, exploitative, any endeavor, any activity would be detrimental, not just to the region but to the rest of Ladakh. So he was the one voice that was reminding the government to fulfill their promises of their election manifesto in 2019. Before the UT was formed, it came under JNK and it was protected through 370. But after 370 abrogation, now it is no more any protection, and it is governed by a lieutenant governor with his commissioners who don't belong to the region, and the policies that they are forming does not take into account the traditions, history, the past, and so on.
So the Ladakhi aspirations, when it was part of the larger state of Jammu and Kashmir, was for more autonomy, even from within the state structure, because of the unique culture and ecology and the features that characterized it. But what was actually done in the name of those Ladakhi aspirations in 2019, while Article 370 was we cannot use
abrogated.
the word. Yeah, it was hollowed out. Was a further centralization of power and complete authority of the sender in Ladakh. So if you could just bring that out, what was Ladakhis wanting before 2019, and where are people of Ladakh now feeling as they are vis-a-vis sender and vis-a-vis Srinagar?
So historically, Ladakh was an independent kingdom, and it was annexed by Jammu, and that's how it became part of India. But in 1942, when Bakula Rinpoche, who was the spiritual and the political head of Ladakh, when he decided that Ladakh would become a part of India, he had always wanted it to have a separate identity. Even Sri Aurobindo vets this way of defining a region where it is not just a pell-mell of mixed identities, but every collectivity should have a way of expressing themselves. Just as in Hinduism, each of us has a swadharma. We have to express our own individuality. Similarly, every collective has to express its collectivity. And that is how the provinces, which were 7 in number during the British times, got formed into states on linguistic basis, which was also a cultural identity. But in 1947, when the states were formed, unlike what the Ladakhis wanted in 1942, Ladakh was made a part of Jammu and Kashmir. And that was the fight before 2019, that it should become a separate state. It did not enjoy more autonomy under 370 because it was under Kashmir. So none of the funds came to Ladakh. It was all used up in Srinagar. So the requirement of Ladakh being a separate state has always been there. So in 2019, when 370 was abrogated and it was made a UT, the fine print was not evident in the first sight. So when UT was formed, it was assumed that it would be UT with legislature. But only later that we found that it was a UT without a legislature, which would be governed directly from the center. And Ladakh is very, very unique on many fronts. Besides being geopolitically the border region between Pakistan and China, It also has a very, very fragile ecology, and it is a desert. It is a high altitude, cold mountain desert, which is very different from the rest of India, which is tropical. Like right now, we are here at plus 30, and there it is minus 20. So the reason why there has to be a separate legislature and separate state is because the policies that have to be formed for a region like Ladakh are very different from the policies we would form in Delhi for the rest of the country. And there have been many instances where the solutions which are cut, copy, pasted from the plains have resulted in disaster. For instance, there was a large project which tried to take care of the flash flood problem. So they embanked it, okay, thinking that when there is a water flow, this embankment would help it. But because the embankments are done in the plains, when there are rivers. But what they did not take into account is by the time the rivers reach the plains, the velocity is very slow and the embankments work. But there it is steep. So just because they cut, copy, pasted that solution, when the flash floods happened, these embankments broke and they obstructed the water and created bigger problem. Whereas the solution there would be a little more plantation in the valleys, which we are doing. So our institute, the Himalayan Institute of Alternatives Ladakh, is a university for the mountain development, which recognizes that the solutions for Ladakh are going to be unique, and therefore the youth there have to be empowered with a very different kind of education so that they can come up with solutions indigenously for that place through experiential learning for that particular context. So the solution that we've been doing and which has worked is through artificial glaciers, ice scoop artificial glaciers. You bring water to those valleys and do greening of those valleys, plantations, so that when flash floods happen, the roots, because otherwise it's a desert and it just, there is a flood that happens. But if you plant trees, then it absorbs the water. So it's a very different solution than the plains. And this is just one example. The other example is of housing. Like how do you make buildings? So we have experimented and prototyped and scaled up passive solar heated buildings which stay right now at plus 15 to 20 when it is minus 20 outside without any artificial heating. So this kind of...
how do you do that?
So it is very much following the principles of Vastu Shastra. Vastu Shastra was where you build habitats taking into account the elemental elements of nature. So these buildings are facing south because in the northern hemisphere the sun travels from southeast to southwest. So when the buildings are facing south, they automatically absorb the sun, and the walls are painted black. We know that black absorbs the heat, and they are glazed with glass. So like a car in summers, when it is closed, when you get in it's very hot, so glass also absorbs. And the wall is a Trombe wall which has water pockets in it. The specific heat of water is 4, so it absorbs more water. So the south wall absorbs the heat, and through conduction, convection and radiation, which is class 8 science, the air is heated through convection, the walls are heated through conduction, and at night when it is cold it radiates. So that is the southern wall. It works as a like a storage of heat, and the other walls and the floor and the roof are insulated, so whatever heat comes stays inside. So it is an application of class 8 science into real life. That is what we call contextual and experiential learning. And we came to know that when we had visitors from Switzerland or the US, it is for them even aspirational because it is made of earth, rammed earth. Earth is a material that breathes, and it is not a kacha house, it is not for poor. So we've tried to make it very luxurious, because if you sell something for the poor, there are no takers because even the poor people don't want to be labeled poor.
It will be like a Tata trying to sell
Nano
a
car.
car for the poor, yes.
Yes, the nano car. So, so these are some of the interventions that we do in the university because we believe that university is not a place where you just give some certificates based on some answers which people have memorized and written so that they can go out and get a job. A university is a place for research and innovation and prototyping that solves the problems of the communities around and serves as a policy document for the government because government does not have the time or the money to do fundamental research or action research. So if educational institutes do this and make these prototypes a working prototype, then it's easier for the government to scale it up. So Sonam has been, and we have founded this university, and this is the kind of work that we are doing to preserve that fragile ecosystem, to work in harmony with nature so that people live with dignity. And then this government comes and makes it into a UT, and the reason of detaining Sonam and putting him in the jail is so that the voice that is standing for this kind of a mindful development is silenced. Because we came to know that
Before,
there is a...
so if I may interrupt you. So, what you described is a kind of connection to the nature and including civilization. In fact, your biographical note says that you are a practicing Hindu, you refer to Vastu Shastra, environment, nature. All those things are keywords that animate our Hindu nationalists, so to speak. Where does it all go wrong? What you're saying should be acceptable to a government and a state that actually claim to be representing Indian civilization, wisdom, etc. So what went wrong?
So one is professing to be a Hindu nationalist party, the other is living it. So I feel that for some reason the party at the center has not understood Hinduism properly. You know, I'll give you an example. When they talk of carbon neutral Ladakh, right, or carbon neutral India, they understand it not holistically. So what I have seen is that this carbon neutral Ladakh is a term which is bandied around so that people will welcome the photovoltaic solar parks that they are planning to bring in, which is of course carbon neutral, but it completely discounts a technology like passive solar heated buildings which do not emit carbon at all. So bringing solar farms is like zero sum game in the sense that you are emitting carbon and then you are absorbing it. That is one way of looking at carbon neutral Ladakh. But the other way and the more fundamental way is to not even emit carbon. That is a better way. Like all these people who go to COP29 and COP30, they are talking about sustainable futures and they are talking about thousands of trillions of dollars needed for this sustainable futures. So we are trying to increase the supply to make it, you know, this thing. So how much of more nuclear reactors, how much of this solar. So that is the Western way of looking at it. How do you increase the supply? Whereas in India, it was how to reduce the demand. And that is what our Hinduism and Buddhism, and they talk about simple living or reducing your desires or living in a way that you don't consume and then decide how to reduce it. So the Hinduism, the way we understand, you know, Hinduism and nationalism is not how we are doing our development. We are calling ourselves a Hindu nationalist party, but the development models that we are following are completely Western. We are following the same things what Europe followed of industrialization, of urbanization, only to realize, as they are realizing 50 years later, 100 years later, that we have created such a divide between rural and urban India we were talking about it, that every discussion or everything happens amongst people like us who represent the top 1% of the English-speaking Indian nation. What about that 70% of rural India which has been left behind? And the true way of nationalism would have been that integration of that rural India and not just an urbanization. So when we speak of sustainable futures, we are talking about true Hinduism of, integrating, of plurality, of diversity, of allowing every region to express itself. And it is very different from the government that is trying to, though call itself Hindu government, but they're talking about centralization, they're talking about one size fits all, there is no diversity, the whole education system, there is one board, whereas we have 5 different kinds of climatic zones, we have so many different kinds of cultures. So India always was a federal state, a diversified federal state which had a strong center for defense, for protection outside. But the development at the panchayat level, at the rural level was celebrating this diversity. That is true Hinduism. Even the 9 darshanas in India, right from Charvaka's materialism to Advaita Vedanta, they are so different, all 9 of them. One is completely materialistic, Charvaka's materialism. Advaita Vedanta is pure consciousness. But India is such a great country that these 9 darshanas find expression. There is not just a tolerance, but a celebration of this diverse point of view, because you know that the truth cannot be contained by just one point of view.
So many of your listeners today might mistake you as someone who grew up in Ladakh. That is not the case. So you grew up in Odisha, right? Can you tell us a little more about where did you grow up and how did you end up being in Ladakh now?
Yeah, so my background cannot be more diverse. So I belong to undivided India, Lahore, my grandparents. And we are Punjabis, but Jains. We were Punjabi Jains, I was born as. And then we moved through Calcutta to Orissa. So my grandfather built most of Orissa, the roads and buildings and the rocket launching pads of Agni and Prithvi. So he was a builder and he had these construction companies. So that's why I grew up on the eastern coast of India in Orissa. And then I was attracted to Sri Aurobindo's philosophy at the age of 16. And I moved to Chennai and Pondicherry. So I lived for about 20 years in south of India. So from the northwest to the east to south of India, and now back to Ladakh to set up northernmost part of India. So I truly appreciate the beauty and diversity of this country and the people, and outwardly we all look very different in the way we dress up and eat. But what made India, a lot of people say that there was no concept called India as a nation, It was always different kingdoms, but I do not agree with that, because the concept of nation that has come about now is more political. But the concept of a nation that India followed was cultural and spiritual. So right from Kandahar in Afghanistan to Kanyakumari, what built and kept us together was this pursuit for the eternal, the search for truth, for reality, what we call spirituality. But unfortunately, the word dharma is now become wrongly translated as religion. Dharma was never religion. Dharma comes from the root dhri of Sanskrit, which means that which holds you. And what was holding the whole country together was this seeking for the highest truth and reality, no matter where one went. And that is what made India a nation. So we were a nation for the last 10,000 years, from the Vedic times. And from there flowed the concepts of sustainability, the concepts of harmony, of diversity, you will find that there is no word for sustainability in Sanskrit. Sanskrit does not have a, if any of you come to know, you can let me know, but I haven't found a word translated in Sanskrit of sustainability, because there was no other way to be. The whole life was sustainable, so there was no need to have a word for it. So harmony and diversity and beauty, these were the values that we all exhibited, and even today, beneath the layers of our Western education and all this left, right wing and narratives and all of that, we all can connect with each other at every part of the country if we go a little, beneath the surface in our consciousness.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak about 8 languages.
Tamil also?
Yes, a bit.
Where did you meet Sonam?
So we were in a conference in Bombay, and it was a conference similar. We were on a panel, and while answering the questions, we found that we were finishing each other's sentences, and he was just thinking of setting up this university, and I was thinking of setting up a residential school in Auroville, near Auroville and Chennai. And after that conference, he approached me so that I could partner him in what he was planning to set up, the university. And I approached him so that he could partner me with the school project. So I said yes, of course, I'll be happy to help, but you can also help me with this project in Auroville. But he said it's too far. I said, no, Auroville is not more far from Ladakh than Ladakh is from Auroville. So that's how it started, but then he invited me to Ladakh, and when I went and met him there, I saw he was staying in a small house with 3-4 of his students, building this ice stupa, and very frugal life. And he was a very bright, creative innovator. But I felt that to set up a university, he needs an institution builder, somebody who can get it off the ground. And I somehow felt a calling for that, because the university that we then started thinking about also had a school within it. And I was only thinking of a school in Auroville. So it was a very organic way in which we started working together. He asked me to help get the land first, which I did. Then he asked me to conduct a large conference, national conference, which I did. And before I knew it, we were co-founders, and this university was set up.
Is he a practicing Buddhist?
So we all remember him through his movie 3 Idiots, and the dialogue which describes him best is, he'll say, "Main science ki taraf se aaya hu," in that movie. So he is primarily a rationalist, you could say, but he is very open to philosophical ideas of any philosophy. So though he is a born Buddhist, and he does practice Vipassana, which he is also, both of us, we practice Vipassana. Even in the jail, he does 3-4 hours of Vipassana. But he is not, both of us are not in favor of the outer, exoteric aspects of religion, but the inner philosophical one. So he wouldn't call himself a practicing Buddhist or practicing this or that. Because I teach the Upanishads and the Vedas and Gita in the light of Sri Aurobindo, and he's my student in my courses as well, and he does Vipassana. So we are, I think, seekers, spiritual seekers, and if we find something good in the Psalms, of a beautiful psalm from the Bible, I think we would, include it in our reading. If we find something, a good Sufi thought we would, accept it.
So-
So this is true, I would say, Hinduism, which, there is a little story that a Muslim person goes to a Hindu rishi and says, initiate me into Hinduism. And he tells him that follow your Quran well and you will be a Hindu. So from that angle, yes, he's a practicing, you can say we are practicing Hindus.
So there is a strand of spiritual Hindus, let me term them that way, who look for the confluence between Buddhist and broadly Hinduism driven faith systems. But there is also a kind of strident hostility towards Buddhism that Hindutva proponents suggest, Savarkar and many other people actually. Though we have a kind of constant lip service to Buddhism, there is also a hostility vis-a-vis Buddhism that political Hinduism or Hindutva has proposed in the last century, I would say. Do you see any echo of that in the way the government approaches Ladakh as a region?
So what I have come to understand is that politically the way we understand religions is very different from how we understand them as a lived philosophy. So I give this example of motherhood, okay? So let's say 2 scholars or 4 scholars who have never become mothers, one from Harvard, one from India, one from Oxford, okay? They are discussing motherhood. There'll be a lot of opposition of views and they'll be fighting each other on what is motherhood and scholarly interpretations. But if you bring 4 mothers together, one can be from the Kalahari desert, one can be from Yale University and one from tribal India and one from any part of Japan. And when 4 mothers who have lived that motherhood, they sit together, there won't be even a necessity to speak because there would be an understanding of the heart. So Sonam and I are not interested in the politics of religion or the politics of sustainability or the academics or the scholarship of these things. We believe in living them in our lives. So the problem of religion is not in the practice of it as a living philosophy. I have practicing people from different religions in the world and we are best of friends. The problem is only the politicizing of it and the divisive. None of these religions teach to divide us, but it is only the politics of it. The same which I gave you the example of this COP30 and COP35, I would say these are the politics of sustainability. They are not living sustainability. So I think the purpose of all these lit fests of going forward in the age of AI is to move from these objective narratives to a more inner and subjective living of these things. And the more we start living these things, we will find that we are not as diverse and different as we think we are. It is the same values of Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, the true, the good and the beautiful, that touches every heart no matter where in the world you come from.
Right. So we will, thank you.
Thank you.
So before we open to the questions from the audience, could you sort of give us a sense of the education is the core of your social entrepreneurship. So what is a vision that guides you that actually gels well with what you just said about the role of LitFest and these kind of congregations? Can you explain that aspect and then we will...
So from at the age of 16, when I got introduced to Sri Aurobindo, I read his book Foundations of Indian Culture, and half of my family is settled in Canada and US, and that's the trend that good students, they just go there. But when I read Foundations of Indian Culture by Sri Aurobindo and came to know the great culture and civilization that India was, there was a change of my heart and future. And I decided that I'm going to dedicate my life to introduce India to Indians and also to the rest of the world. Because the problems of mankind today are the problems of consciousness. And the key to those problems lie in India, in the way we have lived for the last 10,000 years. India is the only unbroken civilization in the world for the last 10,000 years. We have not just preserved the Vedas, but we live it. In our mind, as I said, we may have different narratives and we may have forgotten, but if we peep in the depths of our heart, we are living those values. So it became a mission for me to reclaim those back, and which the government is also trying to do, the Indian knowledge systems as we call them. It is another point of view. You know, the world as we see it is what became of the world post-industrial revolution. So when the whole world was in the dark ages, and the frameworks that we are using for our social, technological development, all frameworks are Western, because that's where the Renaissance happened. But we have come round a full circle in 500 years, and we are face to face with some of the most unsolved problems of this world. Science has realized that after all that physics has learned, it is 95% is still dark matter and dark energy, which we know nothing about. You know, with so much of comfort, and which is unprecedented in the history so far, we today are the most miserable in terms of mental illnesses. You know, with everything at our disposal, we are ruining our ecosystems, our climate, and so on. So where have we gone wrong? You know, or it is not going wrong, as in it is partial. That was a very partial view of ourselves, of nature, of the world, the Western view, on which we have built our entire frameworks. So what Sri Aurobindo calls us Indians to do is to give the world another point of view, another approach, not from matter upward, but from consciousness downward. So there is a need to rework on the frameworks, not from matter up, but from spirit down, from consciousness studies. And that is what we are doing at the Himalayan Institute of Alternatives. And that is what gives me the passion to continue this work, because the future of the world depends on the frameworks from India. You know, a simple frameworks like it is better to reduce your desire than to fulfill every desire. Simple things like it is not GDP that shows your fulfillment, and it's not even happiness of Bhutan, but it is a true evolution of human consciousness. So we have to build new matrices of success, new ways in which we measure our growth, our happiness, and that has to come from the truly spiritual consciousness approaches, and that is what India has to contribute to the world, and that is what I think is the missing piece in the world today, where nobody knows what to do now going forward. Be it a country like America, which was considered the torchbearer of the future, or even a country like Japan, which was the developed country in the East. Everybody is fumbling for, you know, what next? And it is in my mind, the solution is lying deep somewhere in the insights of our rishis, which we have to delve into, bring forth, and bring it out into the manifestation, into the objective world, and build all the frameworks from a new point of view. So that
Well,
is the...
on that note, I think we will come to the audience now. Where are the mic? I think let us start with this madam here, the second row here.
Morning, ma'am. It was so great to hear you speaking about the essence of being Indian. My question is, we see people fighting over the diversities at one area. I mean, even in social medias and other kind of things, people are amplifying this diversities and fighting with each other. And at the same time, the government or the regime, whatever you call it, trying to impose a kind of uniformity rather than a unity. So in this kind of a world, how can we bring back, like on a practical level, since you talked about living the sustainable way, so what can we do to bring back that spirit of India, that spirit of unity? Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We can take one or two questions more and then...
My name is Uttam. I am from the Defense Services. I just want to check with you, ma'am, now that we have many realized souls who are speaking out here in this forum, but I generally see a certain strand of lament that we aren't being heard enough by the current dispensation or the powers to be. But is that completely true? Isn't there a space where you can still voice and be voices of influence for that matter?
Thank you, ma'am, for your very interesting discussion. I would like to understand how you have managed to go through these 100+ days of Sonam Wangchuk's arrest and detention under NSA. And what gives you the strength to face all this?
Thank you. Will you answer those three questions?
So in India, how do we bring this plurality of thought and diversity of, perception? So it starts from oneself. The problem has been in the last 200-300 years, it has been more focused on outside systems, making systems or policies and so on. But the change starts from oneself within. So I think if each of us transforms into being a person that is, thinking in that thesis, antithesis, synthesis, to be able to hold diverse points of views, to not judge, because reality, the truth can be approached in 360 ways and more, degrees. So first within us, if I become an individual that I can hold two opposing thoughts, like for instance, left wing, right wing, okay? We have now people who profess left wing ideology or right wing. But can I be a person that understands the pros and cons of the left and of the right? And then I build for myself a worldview that takes the best of both, first in my individual life, then in my family, because a family is a small ecosystem where there are again different viewpoints. Can I have that inclusion? And then at a collectivity, at the state and the country. So one is this. The second is, when we have lots of points of views, and that is the training of the mind, What is transdisciplinarity? What we are talking about, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. So training of the mind in a way that you first understand one discipline in depth. Let's say you are a sociologist or an anthropologist. But then you also study 5 related or different disciplines in depth, because they bring another point of view. But after you've studied diverse point of views, you should have a big idea around which you are integrating these points of view. Otherwise they lie, all differently. So what is that big idea of life? And India, in all our Upanishads, there is a big idea. Okay, the Mundaka Upanishad says, Satyameva Jayate, truth. Truth is that larger idea. Or another of our scripture says, the whole world is a family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So we need to find out for ourselves, what is that big idea? Like for Sonam, it is environmental protection, for me, it is evolution of human consciousness. That is my highest ideal. So all these different things, then we unite around it. And as we keep doing it at our individual level, then we will have leaders from amongst us who have that as the value system. And then at a collective level and at the national level, we have a big idea that takes us forward. But every big idea can be expressed in a million ways. And to allow that expression in a million ways is what is true Hinduism, true being Indian. But having one big idea that we have to all, and in India it was always seeking the highest. So we have temples in Trivandrum, Shri Padmanabha Swami, we have in Orissa the Konark. They all have different architecture. But one thing which defines them all is they have this spire, you know, and it is about the aspiration rising above. So that is not different. But the architecture, the expression is different of every place. Same is food. You know, it is about what is the big idea? The big idea is about health and nutrition. But you can have a million dishes around it. So the way to allow that plurality is to first have a big idea that resonates with every heart. And in India, that big idea is the seeking of the eternal, you know, that we call spiritual. But then allowing each region, each village, each house to express it in its own way is the way India has to go forward. And how...
Is there enough space for dissent? I think that's a question. Yeah.
Yes. So in this, when everybody is expressing, what we call dissent is just another point of view. And if we don't take it as a dissent, but as a blind spot in our own thinking of being, then the dissent helps us to expand our consciousness, you know. And there is a way to be universal where from the river we can become the ocean, which can then take in every river into it. So when something presents to us as dissent, try to look into the truth that it is trying to bring it. And if we assimilate that and understand, then we widen our mental comfort zones or physical or emotional comfort zones. So dissent then becomes a beautiful, charming expression of another aspect of the same reality. And how I have managed this it's been 125 days. So both Sonam and I are very, very positive and resilient individuals. So for the first 1 month, he was going through a lot. He didn't have a bed even. He was sleeping on blankets. And I was going through a lot of hell myself, trying to figure out how to, file this case and a lot of things but that 1 month we just spoke about the positives that we were going through. We did not tell each other the difficulties. It's only when we had settled a bit from the second month onwards, he told me that I need some more blankets because I don't have a, bed. So I got him 4 blankets, and then I told him about how so many narratives and I have to find my way. Everybody has a point of view of what I should be doing without having the responsibility of the consequences. And we do discuss the issues that we have experienced, like the state of jails in India. 80% of the people are not even convicts, and they are there without any recourse to justice. The state of media in this country, the state of judiciary in this country. So we are learning a lot, and I feel that nothing comes to you without any purpose. So maybe the divine is showing us these broken systems so that we can do something about them in the future. So we are taking this entire experience as a learning thing, because I believe that when you have trust in the divine, then everything that is dished out to you is through the hands of the divine. Nothing comes to you without a reason and without, again, I had this naivety about the state of the country. So I was forced to increase and expand my comfort zone. of it is not so hunky-dory as I thought, it's not so rosy, the whole narrative of development and all that we are being shown is not so true. So it is a wake-up call, it's a learning, and it can either break you or build you. So you cannot control the stimulus that comes from the environment, but you can control the response to it. And if you decide to grow because of it, then what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
So Gitanjali, talking just a point about dissent versus different points of view. So in this case, it is not merely a question of you being accountable for your views. You're actually trying to correct the fact that the views that Sonam expressed were being distorted and presented as a criminal offense. Could you talk a minute about that?
Yes.
Specifically, there was a reference which accused him of being anti-army, which was completely doctored, if I understand it correctly.
So I take this incident that has happened, Sonam's detention based on doctored videos and false, interpretation as a larger crisis of consciousness of humanity, from shifting from an objective worldview to a subjective one. So far, last 400-500 years, science and education was understanding of objective reality. We knew about the smallest proton and photon to the largest galaxy. We know about everything outside. Okay, but we don't know our own subjectivity. What is the big idea of our lives? What is the philosophy of our life? Okay, what makes me happy? What makes me sad? What do I think? So that is a subjective worldview. And we can see in the age of AI that it is becoming very difficult to sift the truth from the falsehood. There are so many narratives. It is very difficult to understand where the truth is. So that is pointing us to a certain evolutionary crisis, that from the critical reasoning mind, we have to go to the higher intuitive mind to be able to understand where the truth is and where it is not. So what they have done to Sonam is, to me, a reflection of the society at large, where we are fumbling in the darkness because we do not know where the truth is. And if you take about 90% of the people or more in this world, there are concepts like manufacturing consent, in the US, the books.
We will take one more question if we have 3 minutes. Sorry to interrupt. That question, and that will be the final one. Yeah.
So, madam, you have actually answered the question, so I'll just make 2 comments. Number 1, may the world have more of your and Sonam's tribe.
Thank you.
And number 2, in you and Sonam, I see you both as stubborn optimists, and may we have more of them. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a nice note to conclude this session. Thank you, Doctor, for the courage, conviction, and clarity. Let us have a big round of applause for Dr. Gitanjali Angmo.
Thank you.